Welcome to the Brandy Show, Conversations with. The idea for this type of show came from the very concept of podcasts. They're available to anyone at any time since they stay posted on the internet portal indefinitely. Podcasts that are time-sensitive, that deal with issues of the day are fine, but after a month or so, they can be out of date. Taking advantage of the technology, it made sense to me to create a program podcast that would last. It's as current the day it is posted to 6 months or a year from now. So I hope you like our series Conversations with. Thanks for stopping by. Today, my conversation is with Ray Lane. For 6 decades, Ray Lane has been a legendary sports broadcaster in Detroit and the Midwest. A Sportscaster of the Year on more than one occasion, a Ty Tyson Award winner, and Michigan Broadcasting Hall of Famer, he is a treasure. As a sports broadcaster who followed him to this incredible market, he paved the way for my success and hundreds of other young broadcasters chasing their dreams. He's a virtual history book of the broadcasting business in Detroit, and his wealth of stories and commentary about the great names in sports and broadcasting is unmatched. He's a friend and one of my favorite guys of all time. Here's my conversation with Ray Lane. First things first, you're a local guy. You graduated from public school.
Yes.
Mackenzie
High School, no longer there on the northwest side of Detroit. Graduated, I won't say what year it was, but it was a long time ago.
And you were a baseball player.
We were known as the Stags, not just the baseball team, but all the athletic teams.
And you went on to Michigan State then, and that was where your lifelong love with Michigan State began, right?
Well, they offered a radio television circular at that time.
Did you know at that time when you came out of high school that radio and TV was your thing?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to play ball, of course, but I knew that I wasn't fast enough and I wasn't strong enough, and I decided that I wanted to do play-by-play and do the sports. And I didn't think about Detroit, but I thought about what a great profession it would be. So it started out with radio, and then Michigan State was offering television. They just started out, and I ended up majoring in radio and television and journalism. And they were one of the few colleges in the country that offered a curriculum on television. Syracuse, Southern Cal, Michigan State, Missouri. Those are the 4 that I remember. And Michigan State was the closest, and I was lucky enough to play some baseball and get partial scholarship there on that.
You downplay your baseball abilities, but you actually got to the Chicago White Sox organization, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Not very long. All of a sudden.
You got there as long as I got to the New England Patriots, probably.
Isn't that something? And now you talk about it, and I was a much better ball player then than now. I got to think about that for a while. I wasn't fast enough. I didn't hit the long ball.
But you had a good glove.
Great baseball sense. Anyway, but it was a chance, yeah.
Radio and television at that time, too, this was in the, 60s? 50s, 60s? That wasn't really considered a profession, was it?
No, my father was really upset.
I was going to say, that's one of those things where nowadays if a youngster says, I want to be an actor, your parents go, what?
Yeah.
Was it the same thing with radio,
same
TV?
Thing, oh, yeah. I remember my dad saying, well, listen, he was an accountant and an office manager, and he was really disappointed that I wasn't going to major in accounting when I went to college. He said, you what? Broadcasting. Nobody ever is successful in broadcasting. I said, Ty Tyson, Harry Heilman.
Those were the guys that
Don Watrick.
Yeah, they were doing Tiger games back then in that day, weren't they?
And doing recreation. Off a teletype, especially the road games. They would do the home games, but the road games, they would take the teletype. All would come on there, strike one. And you would describe like it was happening. Oh, he got a piece of that one, fouled it off just a little bit. You had to take up the time. And those guys were doing that. And there was a theater on Woodward Avenue by the name of the Telenews. And Tyson worked out of WWJ, and Harry Heilman was in a little glass enclosed place at the telenews, and people could come by and see him broadcasting. Can you think of anything more boring than watching a guy talking?
Well, no, but nowadays, if you look at it, Ray, they did the baseball bat hitting the ball sound in the little glassed-in box, didn't they?
That's right, yeah. And you had a ticker that was playing in Peoria or Chicago. Fouled it off that time, reckoning the chance for rain, and they already knew it was raining in Chicago. We might be held up just a little bit here, starting to sprinkle. Well, foul that one off, it's 2-0, you know, and then you go on to it.
When you're a kid, and I was the same way. I wanted to be in broadcasting. Was your goal at that time, I want to be a play-by-play guy, I want to be in Detroit, I want to be a news anchor? Which one was it?
It was, I wanted to do the play-by-play. I guess Detroit, but there were other guys that I used to listen to over in Cleveland, over in Pittsburgh. I can't remember all their names and that, but you used to hear them, and they're great storytellers they were, besides doing the action of the game. And yeah, I did want to do that, and it's exactly what I wanted to do. And there were national known guys like Bill Stern, Harry Wismer. Gee, I can be one of those guys, you know.
And the thing is, though, you paid your dues like the rest of us. But, you know, nowadays kids like to go start in New York at a network. But you, Saginaw, Waterloo, Iowa, Cadillac. I started in Saginaw.
No, you did. You start in Saginaw?
I did. Saginaw was my first station, WUII Channel 25. The CBS eye scanning the Tri-City skies.
That's right. I was Channel 5 for a while, Bay City, Saginaw. And then I was at KWWL, Waterloo, Iowa, where the Whitehawks play every night baseball during the season.
And where did you find the Detroit connection? Because how long did you spend in, quote-unquote, the minors?
Well, that's exactly what it was. It was minor league. And that's exactly. I spent 4 years in the minors. I had Cadillac. Wait a minute. I spent 6 years, excuse me. Minor leagues, Cadillac, Waterloo, Iowa, and then Saginaw. As we used to say, spelled backwards, is Wanna-Gas.
And from Wanna-Gas, you made it to Detroit.
I had a break.
Okay, everybody needs one. Tell us yours.
Mine was a fellow by the name of Bob Oliver, who went to Michigan State at the same time I did. And I was recommended to him, and he knew the name, and all of a sudden had me take an audition. And within a week, I just started at WJRT in Flint, right?
Yeah.
Channel 12?
Still there.
Worked first week, and then I was notified by Oliver if I wanted a job as staff announcer at Channel 2 in Detroit. And I gave notice after 5 days of working at Channel 12 that I was leaving. And I started at Channel 2.
What was staff announcer position?
Staff announcer is you did the station breaks. Nobody ever saw you. You just, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your parents are?
Did you do, like, live commercials?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. That's what got me in. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And I was an R.G. Dunman cigar guy. Of course, you can't do that now as far as smoking on the air. Well, that was a little bit on television, right?
Yeah.
And I smoked those cigars.
Back in the day, they didn't have videotape, and you literally had to do a commercial.
Oh, yeah.
While you were doing your regular entertainment program.
Oh, that's right, yes. And you interrupted yourself to go on to the commercial beat. I got one story, and it was about a year, two years after I started at Channel 2. Jerry Hodak was hired to do the weather. We would do station breaks during the half-hour newscast from 11 to 11:30. We would be in the booth to do the station break, then run out to do the show. He would do the weather, I'd do the sports, right? We bumped into each other one night in the hallway, and then the other night, they thought they had a stereo going. We both gave the station break at the same time. He was in the studio, I was in the... It's Channel 2 time, okay.
Okay. The thing is, when you came to Channel 2, I like to talk about people, because people make our business. And you worked with...
Carl Sinderberg.
Yeah, Carl. I worked with Carl over in Jackson, but in sports, you talk about legends, you talk about Stern, you talk about all these great names. Van Patrick was at Channel 2 when you got there, and you actually replaced him.
Well, yeah, only because he took ill, and he was very busy. And Bill Fleming was there when I got there. And Fleming then went to ABC shortly after that and was doing network stuff. And I figured, whoa, that's a pretty good start. And I only did one sports show when I started there, did the station breaks and all that. But it was a challenge. And we did the live commercials, and that helped me more than anything in the Detroit market, only because other guys didn't know how to do it, and you've been doing this in the minor leagues at other stations, live commercials.
Well, in addition to that, let me pick your brain a little bit. That was great experience for doing play-by-play, because you were live, and sometimes live scares people.
That's exactly right, and that was right about some of the other announcers that didn't want to take a shot. Hey, I can remember guys didn't want to do the A&P commercials. They didn't want to do it. You had to hold a product up, talk at the same time, and they had never done that.
When you got to Detroit, and Van was there, and I know you worked with him a little bit, he was bigger than life, wasn't he?
Van Patrick had the greatest ego that I've ever seen of anybody in the business, but he could back it up. He was great. He was good. He did the Lions football. He did the Tiger games at one time.
And he did nationally Notre Dame football, didn't he?
And not only that, was CBS after he left the Detroit market. He stayed in the Detroit market, but he also worked CBS. He'd do the Notre Dame games on Saturday, and he would do the Lions game or somebody, Cleveland Browns, on Sunday. And he'd always say, have you ever tried to get from Albuquerque to San Francisco on a Saturday? I know you went through that.
I did.
But he was a pioneer trying to make it.
Well, back in the day, they didn't have the same kind of plane schedule they do today. Yeah. That had to be unbelievably difficult.
Yeah.
You also, Van was called Ye Old Announcer.
That's right.
Remember? And Walter Dell, who did the stats for years and years and years with the Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
Walter and I worked together. And Walter would always say, the late, great Van Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
And he loved him because he worked with Van on Lions games. But I didn't realize you did color for Lions games?
For 2 years, Bob Reynolds was a play-by-play man. And this is a true story. I didn't think I had a snowball's chance as far as being involved in that. And they had a guy picked out from New Orleans who was going to do the color. Not an ex-player, but an announcer, because I think they were going to try to work him after a year. Work him as a play-by-play guy. Well, he refused. So his wife wouldn't let him come to Detroit, so he didn't take the job. I got a call 3 nights before the Lions opened the season in 1961 in San Francisco. It's a phone call, and it's the old announcer.
It's Van himself.
Yeah. And he said, I just talked to William Clay Ford a few minutes ago, and I also I talked to the general manager.
Russ Thomas.
Before Russ Thomas.
Nick Curvaway.
Thank you. And I talked, and he said, listen, you're going to be offered the Lions color job tomorrow morning, but you can't act like you know about it, because I just talked with William Clay Ford, and he said that was okay. But he said, don't screw up. So the next morning, the phone rang. It was the Lions front office and said, would you like to be doing the color? And they didn't call it analyzing. It was the color. So I worked with Bob Reynolds. Reynolds didn't know it was coming out. And I showed up like the night before the game in San Francisco, and he said, what are you eating? He said, what are you doing?
Was that was at old Kezar Stadium, wasn't it?
That's Kezar Stadium.
What was that place like?
It was like a barn that used the barn wood for the seats, right? I mean, they were just boards long. Huh? But it was an old beat up, and they were still using it for college games too. And if it rained out there, those boards liable to warp.
But That amazed me. I found that out about you, and I said, my God, I did the Lions color for 31 years. If I'd have known I would followed in your footsteps, I'd have been much more excited about that job.
Well, yeah.
Seriously. Because you were one of the guys that us younger guys, quote unquote, that came to Detroit, we stood on your shoulders because of what you did in this market.
I knew football, but I didn't know football like you know it, or like ex-players know it today. And so I got to know 3 very well-known Detroit Lion players. 2 of them are on the offense and 1 was on defense. And I would get to them the night before a game.
You're not going to get away without telling us who they were.
And I would sound like I really knew what I was talking about.
Well,
look for maybe a sweep on this play here. I know they had practiced it the day before, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it was. Yeah, I told John Gordy.
John, big guard, good player.
A good pulling guard. I don't know how. John Gordy played at Tennessee. A guy that we just lost recently, Wayne Walker.
He worked at Channel 2 in the sports business, too.
Put him in there, and I'll tell you the story on that one, too.
Go ahead.
He became more popular than I was on the air, eventually in San Francisco. But we would kid around during practice. And I went out one year, and it was right around Halloween, and Walker and these guys had warped sense of humor, said that they were dressing up for
you fit right in, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Well, dressed up for Halloween. Well, Walker came out carrying a purse and a few other things. And he was such a great ad-libber in that when we did the interview, I took it back. Front office liked what he was saying, how he talked and all that, and said, hey, when the season's over, offer him a job. And that's how he started at Channel 2.
And then he went on to San Francisco and became a legend in their broadcasts.
That's right, and on CBS.
On CBS, network television.
Yeah.
The other guy I think, didn't you get involved in local television news, and now he's still on the radio, is Jim Price.
Yes.
Is that right? He worked at Channel 2 with you for a while.
He worked at Channel 2, yeah. I can't remember. We had 4 guys doing sports, and Price worked on the weekends. And funny thing was, Jim did a great interview, and general manager at that time also said, hey, he's pretty glib on the air. Why don't you see if you'd be interested in a part-time job? So Jim was having some marital difficulties at that time, and his wife called me one night and said, it's rather embarrassing. He doesn't need a job that bad. But anyway, he got better as he went along. And
the thing is that you helped launch a couple careers of former players. That's pretty kind of cool when you think about it.
Oh, it is, yeah. But that was so long ago, people don't know that. You know?
Well, that's why we're doing this interview. That's why we're doing this podcast.
Okay, is that what it is?
Right. And now the other thing I want to get to is that we've been talking football. We've been talking Wayne Walker, John Gordy, Jim Price. But baseball's your game.
What? Yes, I thought so. But I got into hockey late.
I know that was late, but I want to go to baseball because, again, you talked about all the great announcers and all that.
Oh, yeah.
You sat next to George Kell.
Oh, George Kell, I worked the first 2 years I worked with.
And that was television games, weren't they?
I got to think about that for a second. Yes,
he did both. He did both, though, didn't he? Radio and TV?
No, not right away. They were separate. And then they did. But I worked with Kell, and they only did probably about 45, 48 games a year. They didn't do every game. And so there would be some games that on the weekend you'd be Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And other times you didn't work at all because they were home and they didn't televise the home games.
And how was George to work with? Because he was, again, not a broadcaster background. He didn't study it, but he was so easy to listen to.
Yeah, that's a guy. He's the down guy, and he was easy. He took it for granted that everybody else had the background that he had, which they didn't. And so there were certain things that a professional announcer doesn't do that he did, vice versa. And I always thought that Al Kaline, when he went to work with George Kell, would have been better served had he worked with a professional announcer for a year or two, because Al did get better, but it was like pulling teeth the first couple of years when he worked with Kel. But Kel wasn't a broadcaster. He was just a former player, and there was no way that he was going to help anybody as far as instruction unless they asked for it.
And then you worked with Ernie Harwell, legendary Ernie Harwell.
Harwell was the true Southern gentleman and easygoing. I remember the day I got the job to work with him after 2 years with Kel, they said, you had a choice of going to radio or staying on TV, and I said, I'll take radio. That's Harwell called me and said, congratulations. Anything you want and need from me, you got. Any way you want to do the game, you got it. There's no certain way. Just be yourself.
That's great advice. How old were you at the time? Were you how many years into the career?
I was in my 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd been around a little bit?
Yeah.
But Ernie had been, he was legendary at the time, wasn't he?
Well, legend, sure. He had worked in Baltimore. He had worked with the Brooklyn Dodgers when he started out. And as people know the story, the only guy to ever be traded, a broadcaster, for a ball player. And Cliff Dapper was on the third-string catcher for Brooklyn, and they had to have a player down at Atlanta. Ernie was doing the Atlanta games. They sent Harwell up to replace an announcer that I'm trying to think of the name, who was sick, and Harwell took his place.
The other thing about your baseball career, and you're back in the days of Ernie and everything, you saw this city get torn apart in '67, and you announced the '68 season World Championship. Tell us how this city repaired itself, and you were right there on the front lines watching it, because the Tigers, many people felt, were the Band-Aid that fixed what was ailing the city of Detroit.
I think that's true. That's a great description. The thing is, most of the players felt that they should have won it in '67, lost by one game, final day of the season, on '67. When I went to spring training in '68, Freehan, Kaline, a couple of pitchers.
McLean, Lolich, big pitchers.
Those are the two guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had all said, we're going to win it this year. You didn't have that confidence the year before, but they found out they could win, and they knew. To answer your question about healing the city, part of that was the Detroit Tigers, no doubt about it. And they got rolling again in '68, and all of a sudden the people started coming down there. It doesn't matter what race it was. They were coming down to watch the attraction because they were playing great baseball. That helped to heal the city. There were some wise political moves made also that helped heal the city. Plus, I think people got an understanding also of themselves after '67. But baseball was it. Baseball was the catalyst that helped heal, anyway, the city of Detroit.
One of the legendary stories is a post-game interview you did. Eddie Brinkman was the shortstop. You were live in the locker room after the championship.
Yes.
And he dropped one of those words you can't say on television or radio, and you were the guy standing there. I remember the picture, champagne dripping from your glasses. What was that all about?
All I asked him was, tell me what your feeling is, Eddie, after this great momentous occasion. And he just looked me in the eye.
Did you see the mischief in his eye?
No,
you didn't see it?
It came out of nowhere. No, it came out of nowhere. And he said, I'm so proud of these blank guys. And my jaw dropped, and I thought I heard him right. And I went on with the interview, and I didn't say anything. And then I got a couple of phone calls later on in the afternoon or evening. The guy said, boy, that was really great that you played that tape that way. I said, that was live. I wouldn't have let him said it. But he went ahead and said it anyway.
Was there any...
It was an emotional thing that came out of him.
Exactly, and it really captured the moment perfectly of this team winning the championship, given what the city had been through. Did you hear any repercussion from any management types?
No, I didn't. I had people laughing about it and that, and it was really... He cursed on the air. But what are we going to do? Now, it might not mean anything right now. I'm not sure about that. It might, because there's a few slips the last few years.
Now, there was a guy on C-SPAN. He was a senator from South Carolina that used it just the other day. So it has loosened up a little bit. And then after 68, you stayed in town. You were a news anchor, sports anchor. Then the 84 championship at Sparky Anderson. Tell me about Sparky Anderson, your relationship with Sparky, because while you weren't broadcasting the games then?
I had left and gone to Cincinnati.
That's what I mean. You went to Cincinnati. How did that come about?
Well, Van Patrick had taken ill, and I had been asked if I could step away from the radio, because Paul Carey wanted to come in from JR, and that's the station that carried the game. And if I would sit out one season, I'd go back on with Kell. So I agreed to it, and I ended up doing a scoreboard on TV. That following December, I got a telephone call at the house from a fellow by the name of Hal Middlesworth, who was a public relations director for the Tigers. And he says, I got bad news for you. And I said, what's that? He said, Channel 2 didn't get the rights to the Tiger games. Channel 4 outbid them by $1 million. I'm left there holding my jockstrap because there's no room in the inn, pal. That's why I started inquiring of different places, and I had done some preseason football down in Cincinnati with the Lions, and the guy that was the producer and director for the Reds and for the Bengals remembered me, and they needed an announcer, and I got a call to come down there.
How was it?
And I worked for Marge Schott.
Marge Schott, the famous Marge Schott. Did you get to meet her St. Bernard?
Oh,
Shotzi.
Several times. I know several guys that lost their jobs because they didn't use Shotzi on the TV show. And Shotzi, the ground crew, had to clean up every time Shotzi came on the field. Just before a ball game, they're out there with shovels. So Shotzi caused a lot of hardship.
Coming from Detroit, where you had a reputation, to Cincinnati, where you really didn't. How did that work? And did the folks in Cincinnati accept you? Because a baseball team in a major city like that, that's their baby. And locals, you do usually pretty well.
I did pretty good. They did a nice campaign for me as far as publicity experience and that. And the association with Harwell certainly helped. I worked with a fellow by the name of Bill Brown, who was a sports director at WLW in Cincinnati. 50,000 watts, baby.
Yeah.
And it got all over the South. I know that.
Did you enjoy the baseball games in Cincinnati, and the players? Did they take to you like the Tigers players did?
Yeah, it worked out real well. And believe it or not, I had a couple of Caribbean players who they thought I was sort of funny anyway. and Concepcion turned out to be one of my close friends. Bench was a good guy. And we had Tom Seaver there at that time. But I got to Cincinnati when the Reds weren't the dominant team. They were starting to slip. And the big thing was the Red machine is falling apart. And it did.
It did.
I was there.
But you also then, because Sparky came to Detroit after the Red machine fell apart, so you had already some relationship with the great manager.
Well, I hadn't. I only from spring training, from the Tigers would play them. But the day that he managed was the day after the Reds had opened up. They usually opened up day before the other major league teams. I was back in Detroit and still working for Channel 2. And I did an interview with Sparky. And the guys on the Reds team said he hated the designated hitter. So my question to Sparky was, and he called me every name in the book afterwards, Sparky, listen, what do you think about the designated hitter? And he just stared and looked at me. And I said, that comes from your former players. They wanted to know. And afterwards he said, you so-and-so, so-and-so. Anyway, but that really gave me a bond with Sparky from that time on.
Of all the managers you saw, and you saw championships with Sparky in '84, you saw it with Mayo Smith, and Billy Martin was here, you were here. Which one of those managers that you say, hey, this guy could do it?
I would think it was Sparky.
Was it?
It was Sparky. I liked Mayo because he was a great card player and used to take money from on all the flights. I never won one. He was a riverboat gambler from the time he was about 10 years old down in Missouri, shooting pool and playing cards. Sparky was, or Mayo was. But Sparky, fundamentally, I think probably would explain the game, tell you why it happened, what could happen, and more so than any other manager I was ever around.
And amazingly, from those great names in baseball, you make the transition to hockey. I mean, you did the Red Wings when the Red Wings won Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
And you were in the locker room with those guys. Good friends with the announcers, Bud Lynch, Bruce Martin.
Yeah.
That transition, but it was seamless for you.
But I loved hockey. Excuse me, go ahead. You're gonna ask
No,
me.
that's your start. You loved hockey.
I loved hockey. I did since I was a kid. Couldn't skate worth a darn, but I tried to. Played a little amateur hockey around Detroit, Mack Park. But I got a general manager came in that remembered me doing sports. And I was still doing sports a little bit at Channel 50, but not a lot. And he said, hey, you used to do hockey, didn't you? I said, well, amateur hockey. And then he said, I'm going to put you on the Red Wings. So I worked with two, I think, of the great announcers. That was Mickey Redmond and a fellow that we just lost last year, Dave Strader.
Dave Strader, what two great announcers.
Great announcers.
I couldn't agree more.
Best combination of announcers I thought of doing any sport in the city of Detroit. And anyway, I was the showcase. I'd put them on, introduce them, then in between periods do the interviews. Got to know some of the players, be out to practice, and that was a ball.
How'd you get the nickname Razor? The hockey players called you Razor.
Yeah, I got that from our former goaltender and a couple of guys on the fence. And I didn't have it until they won the Stanley Cup the first time. I walk in the thing, hey, a Razor, and I had a couple of cigars. And I put the cigar in one of their mouths, and I said, Razor, you can't do that to me. I'm not allowed to smoke. And I was Razor after that. And, the great thing was, a lot of people never knew I did baseball, right? It's been a long time. But the association with the Red Wings and 16 years of getting in between periods in hockey really kept my identification as long as it did. And it's great, and I'm very thankful for that, too.
And I know, blowing smoke up your skirt here, you're one of the best baseball play-by-play guys I've ever heard. And I still think to this day you could do baseball play-by-play.
Well, maybe. I don't. That's a very nice compliment. Thank you.
It's a fact, too, because I remember you did a couple games not too long ago on Fox Sports Detroit.
Yeah.
And it was like you hadn't lost a step.
Well, I also, short-term memory was not too good at the time. Oh, who's out there in center field? Who's there in right field? But it was a lot of fun.
Of all the championships and all that stuff, I mean, is there any one, baseball, World Series championships, hockey Stanley Cups, football championships? You were with Michigan State when they won the NCAA in '79. Which one kind of stands out that you remember?
I'd say the Tigers winning the World Series in '68, but second is the Michigan State winning the NCAA.
And you did basketball. That was with Chris McClure, right?
Yeah, did that, and we did the championship game, but nobody knows that because it had the highest rating in television, and we were doing the radio.
But you did the game, Magic and Larry Bird.
Oh, yeah.
The two guys that changed the NBA.
Really did. And we did it. And Magic, I'll say, outplayed very much so. But he had a good supporting cast like Gregory Kelser, not too bad, right?
Right.
Vincent.
Jay Vincent's pretty good.
Pretty good. And they had a couple
Big
of...
guy, the young guard, a little small guard, Terry Donnelly.
Berkovich had Terry Donnelly
yeah.
out of St. Louis,
Right.
and then Berkovich out of Windsor.
Yeah.
So-
Good basketball. They won an NCAA championship.
Not a bad coach.
No, Judd was one of the best.
Judd was outstanding.
Yeah, he was.
And had a great sense of humor.
Dry.
Yeah.
But one of the
He could
funniest
cut you.
human beings on the
He
planet.
could cut you up,
Yeah, he could.
And, you'd be late for an interview sometime, especially after the end of the game. And you're supposed to get down there within a minute to interview him post-game wise. There was one time where he didn't show up for about 5 minutes. He did it on purpose. He said, "I'm just getting even with you because that's the way it's supposed to be."
The other thing that he did is you were on television in Detroit in the news market, local news. I say that the days when you were there, Ackerman, Dave Dowse, those were the golden days of television locally in Detroit. Would you agree or disagree?
I would agree with that. Not because of us, but that was the way television was run at 3 stations. And you mentioned the guys doing sports. You got to look at the newscasts too. And I'll tell you what, it was a pretty professional job. And also, they did it with a sense of humor. Most of them did. There was one guy that didn't too much, and that was good old Al Ackerman. But he had a purpose, and what he was doing is he was going to tear apart people that were successful, that's all.
I always thought that was what I called a shtick. Sonny Elliott would say that's his shtick. Sonny's a dear friend. I know a dear friend of yours.
Yeah.
By the way, you're the only man, I think, on the planet that could break Sonny Elliott up on TV.
I didn't know that at the time. Until the second time I did, then I was threatened with my job. Not by Sonny, but by management.
Well, when your bare leg came up behind the anchor desk with a lit cigarette between your toes, Sonny couldn't handle it.
I know it. I would see Sonny while he was working at Channel 4, and then when he came to work at Channel 2, which I thought he should still be at 4, but they were lucky at 50 when he came on too, but at Channel 2, I had no idea. I thought he was such a professional that he would never break up, and that was a real test. When he did break up, I was okay with that one, but I did another one about 2 nights later, and that's when I got called into the front office and said, "No more. You can't do that."
Was that with the waste paper basket?
Yeah.
I know that one. Yeah. Sonny told me 100 times that story. He said, "You're the funniest man on the planet."
So I always thought he was. Okay.
Well, he was very funny. I enjoyed your relationship with Sonny because I think Sonny, every time you mention your name, he smiled. And I know you smile every time you think of Sonny.
And I'll tell you one thing he kept saying, "You should be back in baseball. You should be back in baseball." He was always a very complimentary guy as far as my profession.
And one last story, Ray. When my wife, Robbie, I'm told, this is a rumor rolling around the confines of Channel 2 Broadcast House, I think they call it maybe. But when Robbie was let go, that you actually threw a typewriter? Was that accurate?
That's accurate. It was an old typewriter. But anybody that went on vacation and came back and got a surprise like that, they deserved a typewriter. But I didn't throw it at anybody, just destroyed it, that's all.
Anything else you want to say about this whole process? Because I know you and I were talking before we did this. You said, "What are you going to do before I die?" And I'm thinking, no, you're a great history guy. This is a history of Detroit television that I think people should know about. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're right. You're right. It was a lot more fun. You know that from your experience. You could get away with more. There's still stories out there that haven't been told, and we never got around to talking about a certain guy that was very popular in this city during that time, and it was BB, Bill Bonds.
Bill Bonds.
We never got around to Bill.
We didn't, yeah.
And I never worked with Bill.
I know. Did you manage to have a cocktail or two or be around Bill when he was having a cocktail?
Yes, and I saw a couple of his Friday night fights.
Did you do the play-by-play?
No, I didn't.
Right?
I just walked in, and Billy was in action.
You are a delight. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my talk with Ray Lane as much as I did. I had so much fun catching up with him and picking his brain about an incredible career. Every time I see Ray and have the chance to talk, I'm reminded how lucky I am to be able to learn and benefit from his experiences, to have the opportunity to appreciate where my career has gone thanks to his work in a trailblazing way, especially in the play-by-play field. Thanks for everything, Ray. Remember to keep track of my Facebook page, Jim Brandstatter76, my Twitter address, @JimBrandstatter, and my podcast portal, thebrandyshow.com, and YouTube channel, The Brandy Show, for my next Conversation With.